Pyrography for beginners and beyond. Today we're having a little look at a parrot and how we can create depth with the plumage. We don't want the parrot to look flat. We want these feathers to look like, they've got depth to them. So I'm using a large flat round shader, and I've got my heat setting quite high on number 4. And what I'm looking to do is add some depth and shading to the feathers. The way I like to construct pyrography is I like to take my time, search out those shades and tones to add depth to our art. With this large round shader, I can use the very edge of the pen to flick my strokes of feathers. There's quite a lot of graphite still down at the moment, which will be getting removed. But to start with, we're just going to try and add a little bit of definition and a little depth. Now obviously at the top of the feather it's going to stick out, isn't it? So this is a bit too dark at the moment. We're going to have to try and blend this out. This is a very old piece that I was working on when I very first started pyrography. I've done a few birds since then, and so I thought we'll put into practice some of the things I've learnt from the few birds I've done in the past. Remember, we want to try and make the plumage look as natural as possible and also have shape to the bird. And so this is the bird's chest, where usually the plumage is a bit more, I wouldn't say fur-like, but it's not the same as the feathers. Let's see how we go. See, right underneath each feather there's going to be some shading as one feather sits on top of another or sticks out further from another. We can add as much depth as we like simply by darkening underneath each feather. Let's take this feather for example. Like I said, we don't want to rush this process. We want to try and make it as realistic or as smooth and as soft as possible. So I'm just gently adding heat and depth of shading. I don't want to go at it too fast and burn too quickly, otherwise I'll lose the realism effect that we're going for. Pyrography is also a patience art form, most like any other art form. If you think about when you're painting or a pencil artist, you don't go with your darkest pencil straight away, do you? You build your way up to the darker tones, and it's the same for pyrography. Try and think in your mind's eye how the feathers would look as one sits on top of another. This pen is wonderful for just adding gentler strands of, as a feather is. This is where some dark graphite is, but this is patterning in the feathers. Once the graphite's removed, it will look completely different. Birds are a wonderful subject to woodburn. I'm also relearning a lot about pyrography myself, as I've had a long layoff due to health reasons. But I'm glad to be back. I hope to be able to share some of the things I've learnt over the 5 or 6 years that I've been creating pyrography art. You see how I'm not going very fast at any feather. I'm moving around a lot so I can start seeing an image in my mind's eye of how I want the feathers to look. If you think about the bird as well, with the shape, this is going to be the darker area, then it's going to bowl out, isn't it? And then it's going to tail off around there. So we want to try and create some shape to the bird. This is more, again, like a fur area. It's very fine. I think they call it down, don't they? Here we've got more patterning going off. So I'm just very lightly going at this with the very tip of my pen. I can't work too far now, otherwise this is a large board I'm working on. I just had a few pieces that I'd laid out, like I said, some years ago. This area needs some work. I really butchered that top bit, but let's see if we can blend it out. If you think about this feather here, it's going to come out, isn't it? And this large wing area is going to be nearest front to us. So other things need to be pushed back to make this wing sit forward. So a lot of the area of this part of the wing will be lighter. Let's add a bit of feather in to that. So once we get the general shape of the feathers down, then we will remove all this graphite. What you can do as well to add like shape into feathers is you can have your dark area at the top, leave an area in the middle, lighter, and then darker at the bottom, and it will give the effect of a curve. This needs to be blended much more. It's really harsh that at the moment. Think about which way the feathers would go. By taking your time as well and not going too hot and fast with your pyrography, it's what I always try to explain to people. It's a lot like tattoo art, where the tattoo is builds up over time, not that they go over and over your skin, pushing the ink deeper and deeper. It's the same with pyrography art. Instead of just burning the top, we want to soak the heat into the wood. If we were just to go at it full force, we wouldn't capture that depth. I like to push the heat way deep into the wood. Now here we've got two feathers. So if we think about this, this feather is going to be sat forward from this feather. So let's add some feather into the edge of it, just flicking gentle strokes. It gets to this point here, doesn't it? So this feather here is going to go off the other way. So until you see that picture in your mind's eye, all of a sudden you'll keep working on a piece of art. To start with, you're completely blind. You don't know where you're going, you don't know what depth of shading you need when you start out on a piece. That's why it's best to take your time. The more you take your time, the more you work on a piece, all of a sudden you start to see the piece in a three-dimensional view. And before you know it, you can all of a sudden see what you know, the tones and the shades that you're searching for. So we can add fine detail to the feathers. Permanently just using the very edge of this pen. Often I'm just using the tip, I'm not using it flat in any way. There are other pens you can use for feathers. I just picked this one up today and took a liking to it. I do use this pen quite often for skin tone on human portraits. But you can use whatever pen you feel comfortable with. Think of the area right underneath. There's going to be less light from the feather that sits underneath the one above, so it must go darker. This feather's going this way. We're not going to fully shade all the feather because we want to leave some like sort of highlights. on the end of this feather here before the down. I'm going to go darker to show where this feather ends. There's a lot of graphite on here that needs to come off. There's a lot of little bits of feather here all going off in different directions. Just take your time. My stomach growling. Again, this feather is sat underneath this larger one, so we want to add some shade. I want to get right underneath that feather if we can. Again, if you've watched any of my videos in the past, I do reference Darryl Tank, who was a brilliant pencil artist, and his rule of thumb was where there's less light, it must go darker. And if you follow that simple rule, you can add so much depth to your artwork. We're slowly beginning to build plumage. this feather would be going in this direction. So I'm going to go very light at the minute on it. Add some depth here as well on this. I'm going to call it down, I don't know what it is. Wispy feathers. And that is how you start to build the feathers. I'm going to put it on time lapse now, and I will do some voiceover of anything that I think is of interest. At least you can see the bird coming to life. Okay, so I'll switch over to time lapse. I'll see you all shortly.
I feel nauseous, believe me. Never had a lot of shit come easy. Had to work hard, struggle just to be me. Had to rise up just so they could see me. Did what I had to do just to feed me, and what was left over I put towards my dreaming. But the only thing in life that has meaning are the things you gotta work for, believe me. Take into your hands a plan, your own hands can land your own brand. And damn, I feel like no one takes accountability. They want the credibility, convincingly unwilling to put in the fucking hours it takes to get some power. Don't be fucking sour, take a cold shower. Scream until you're louder, work until you're prouder. And fuck all the doubters, they're just fucking downers. I swear to God they all let me down. I always fought just to wear the crown. I'm pissed off at these fucking clowns.